Welcome to the Navigating Disruption podcast. I'm your host, Mike Klein, and I'm here along with my co-host, Janet Hitchen. Today we have our guest, Max Forsyth. Max brings an informed, contrarian perspective on the current communication job market and challenges several prevailing narratives. As principal of Comm Search and Selection, Max is a recruiter working with Fortune 500 and FTSE 100 companies and senior communication professionals. Today, he offers insider intelligence on hiring practices, the role of AI in recruitment, and what's actually happening beneath service-level complaints about market conditions. Welcome to the podcast, Max.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you very much for that tee up. I now need to back it up with a really long drive down the fairway, don't I?
That would be good. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no problem. And actually, God, I'm really proud of that. I just thought of that on the spot. That was great.
Are you a golf person by any chance?
No, I don't even play golf. I'm rubbish. It just came out of nowhere. Yeah.
It just came to you. It's obviously something to do with the Ryder Cup recently, and everyone's kind of now able to get their own little golf pun in there.
Oh yeah, although it turned into a bit of a hammering, didn't it, for Team USA? So
I think the less we say about that, probably the better.
Indeed.
I don't know. I find the American personalities in the Ryder Cup often rather irritating and challenging. So I'll roll over and play dead on that one.
Yeah.
Let's get stuck in then, shall we?
Sure.
Do you want me to go first? Shall I jump in? I jump in with a question.
Sure.
So, Max, we've heard lots of stuff for the last 2 years about the market's difficult. The market's going to come back. Oh, the market isn't coming back the way we expected. So, what are the three biggest trends that you're seeing in the communication market at this point in kind of mid to late 2025?
So, I think I would start answering that with a nod to, yes, we are all aware of, particularly at the more senior end of the market, it is definitely tight, and it has been tight for a good 18 months, 2 years now. And with that, there are individuals who we all know who are finding the search difficult, and we will always empathize with them. But overarchingly, the market is definitely not as bad as perhaps a lot of LinkedIn feeds can make out.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's the LinkedIn algorithm or the social media or the wider social media algorithm that tends to do really well off fear, and quite a lot of those quite emotive posts tend to do very well on LinkedIn. I think, it's important, to really take a step back, and, there are senior roles out there. The overarching issue is that there are fewer roles available than there are senior candidates on the market. Plus, we've got the added addition that, given the wider macroeconomic environment across the vast majority of economies is relatively flat, or if there is growth, it's typically very low single-digit percentages. So that is causing there to not be a huge amount of growth in the number of roles, but also those that are currently employed and are in quote unquote safe positions, that is certainly leading to them staying where they are, and therefore those roles are not opening up as much as they would in a normal market. So there's a few overarching macro factors to the communications job market at the moment that is out of candidates' control, and there is, my advice would be, there's no point trying to get too wound up about those factors, because there's nothing you can do to control it.
Yeah. And is that the same because the two markets that you sort of tend to focus on are the US and the UK, is that the same in both markets, or are there any sort of slight changes?
It's fairly reflective in both. I think if there has been a slight consolidation, of markets just because of the size of the US economy and, the number of the world's largest companies across many industries are either US headquartered or US listed.
Yeah.
That we have seen an increase and a trend of moving roles back home, and by back home I mean back to the US. So yeah, a lot of those communications roles have been moved back.
Okay.
So you mentioned specifically the surplus of senior candidates for senior roles. And in my travels, if you will, in my conversations, I hear a lot about ageism in the recruiting process. Particularly people in the over 40, over 50, age bracket saying that effectively they're not getting interviews, much less getting jobs. But you don't necessarily see this as ageism in and of itself. Elaborate on that bit, and if you've got any advice for older communication professionals, what do you think they should be doing right now to stay viable in this market?
Is there ageism? Hey, look, I think there are always going to be individual companies or individual circumstances whereby, it's always going to be incredibly difficult to prove because no one is ever going to admit it. Of course, you open yourself up to various lawsuits and tribunals, etc. But we all know it does go on, and sometimes that can be a case of a hiring manager perhaps a little bit insecure who doesn't want to hire someone older than them into a position in their team. We all know that happens, not loads, but it does happen. So
yeah.
Yes, there are always, unfortunately, going to be some implications of that. On the general trend, though, I would say no, it's not as rife as people may think it is. I think, I had a look pre our call at both the FTSE 100 and the top 100 companies in the US, and the most senior communications roles and corporate affairs roles are still held by people over the age of 40. A lot of them are over the age of 50, some into their 60s. So yeah, it is not like suddenly all of the top jobs, or top jobs -1 or -2, are suddenly going to everyone in their late 20s, early mid-late 30s. That's just not the case. The overarching factor here is, if you look at an org chart of any function, but certainly a communications function, because on the whole they tend to be smaller and one of the leaner functions across an organization, you very much get a Christmas tree effect as you move up the ladder, and as you move up in terms of, it's not necessarily an age thing, but years of experience. So, and that can happen. It gets quite narrow quite quickly. As soon as you really get beyond senior manager level, which typically would be anywhere from 8 to 15 years worth of experience, and then you start going for the head of and director roles, CCO roles, etc. In a lot of organizations, there will be a handful of those positions. Sometimes one, sometimes two, sometimes three. It's only really the very largest organizations where you do tend to get an individual senior role looking after one service line of a multinational business that has 12 different service lines and multiple products. So yeah, that's the bit, and that's the squeeze. So it's always been the case of, when the market contracts slightly and it gets a little bit tighter, it goes back to my point earlier of, there are a lot more people who have got, that more senior level experience. They just don't all fit onto the top of the Christmas tree.
So that's kind of where you get the at that level below. That's where you start to get the overqualification / ageism complaints, if you will.
Yes.
People not getting any traction when they're applying for these levels below their level of experience, if you will.
I think when they're applying for levels below their experience, this is certainly something that's it's definitely more prevalent in the UK and Europe than it is in the US, just because of the nature of, particularly things like maternity leave here in the UK. You do get a lot of what we would call FTC roles, so fixed term contracts, which typically here in the UK would be anywhere from 9 to 12 months. And sometimes that doesn't have to be the top job, as you say, Mike. That can be a couple of levels down. But actually what you find is a lot of hiring managers and companies for those roles are quite happy to bring someone in who perhaps their natural permanent role would be a level up, but actually for 9 to 12 months it's really beneficial for the hiring manager and the company to have a really experienced and safe pair of hands in the role. So you do see that. The bit to which I think you're slightly more referring to is probably more on the permanent role side of things, and where people who may typically be at a head of level or director level, and they're applying for permanent manager or senior manager roles just because of the state of the market. You've got two competing, well, actually no, there's probably three competing priorities here. You've got the candidates who are very experienced and could do a lot of these slightly more junior roles almost with their eyes closed and kind of one hand tied behind their back, and they would be great. They wouldn't need any upskilling. There wouldn't be too much lead-in time. But you've then got the flip side of that, where for most of those vacancies, you are likely to have external candidates either already at that level or just the level below who are looking to push up into those positions. Plus, you're very likely to have these same internal candidates as the external candidates also wanting to push on and also applying for those roles. So you've got three different streams and channels
kind of
of
coming
candidates.
in at the same time.
Exactly. All competing at the same time. So that makes it even more competitive. And then you have some of those, whether they're conscious or they're unconscious, the bias piece. I think if you look at it from a company perspective, and if you are a company that one is really trying to look at increasing your long-term retention of staff, you've then also got the piece of, hey, actually, for a business, it's much more productive. It saves them an absolute ton on recruitment fees, bringing someone in external who's normally a bit more expensive. If you have your internal L&D and your internal talent development pipeline, if that's working well, ideally what you really want to be doing is, and this is where the growth of the grad schemes really came in over the last 20 years, right? You bring people in, and then, you develop them internally, and then you can move them up the ladder. They're more used to it. So, you've got all of these different competing priorities, plus you've got you've got that overarching L&D, HRE cost piece, which, are valid arguments and valid, noble and good things, I think, for companies to do. So, hopefully that answers your question.
Right. Basically what you're saying is that, with the exception of the kind of full-time maternity cover, perhaps even kind of project-based consulting stuff, people coming in from an excessively senior level are competing against people who are coming upwards for whom there is financial and structural incentive, as opposed to just simply the concern that a hiring manager might be importing a rival into the role.
Project and interim, I'd say less so, because actually, that's where often, greater experience, etc., can be really valuable and is often valued, certainly. And by the way, that is happening, and that has happened over the last 18 months, 2 years. I know plenty of fairly senior communications candidates who are in long-term contract roles or interim roles at the moment that are not necessarily at their level, and they won't put the level on LinkedIn, but they are working and they are a step or two down. So that's okay. It's more it's the permanent roles. That's where it's really tough.
Okay. I wanted to ask, because we heard, I think it was still on the subject of ageism, we heard, I don't know if it was about a year ago, and there was something about, Workday. I think anybody who's ever applied for a permanent role ever in their life has probably bumped into a Workday system.
Yes.
And Workday generally asks for dates, which are always fun because they want you to write absolutely everything down. And I think there was something, and I can't remember where I read it, so I really apologise, but that said that Workday was actually being told that it needed to remove all the dates because actually it was causing a problem. And there was an ageism there was an optic that there was something going on around ageism, that people were being forced to put stuff in and they weren't even making it through because they might put this is when I got my degree, boom, instantly you're automatically out. It doesn't matter what else you put in. It doesn't matter what else. They've immediately been able, if you took your degree between the ages of 18 and 21, they can situate you, and they've gone, and there was some bias happening there. Is that still something that we're seeing, or has that sort of started to disappear?
From an automated perspective, I don't know of companies who are still doing that. I mean, I think they would be on very, very
dodgy
shaky legal ground.
Yeah.
If they had an automatic ATS filter that was taking a role in saying anyone who graduated pre-year whatever
is out,
automatically exclude them, reject them.
I
mean that would be absolute lunacy, and very illegal in many countries. So no, I don't think that is where there might be. And there are several studies that have shown this, not so much on dates, but certainly names, for people that don't have a first or a last name that what's the right phrase, that would be ethnically native to that country.
okay.
That there have been studies that have shown that can lead to more manual rejections for roles, and a lot of candidates have started to say you are applying for a role in the US or the UK, and perhaps they have a surname which kind of would have come from the subcontinent. They've changed that, right? Or they take it out. And instantly, they have been seeing a greater success rate. Clearly, that is wrong, that has been happening in the first place. But that certainly hasn't been that certainly hasn't been an automated thing. That has been whether it's conscious or unconscious, there's been a bias there.
It's really shocking to hear that, Max, because I mean, when I first started having what I consider to be a proper job, probably about 20 something years ago, we were talking about that then. And it was, oh yeah, we're going to wheedle that out. We're not going to do that anymore. And then suddenly we're still talking about that. It feels like we're not really making much progress on some of the stuff.
No, I would agree. There are a few organisations out there. If I think about the searches that we have run, whether it's ComSearch or even me founding ComSearch and being in other agencies, I could name you 2 or 3 clients that have insisted on effectively blind CVs, where you take off names, you take off dates for education, you leave on dates for experience, because otherwise it's quite hard to be able to judge how long someone's been in the company, for example. But you take out a lot of those pieces of information that have been have been subject to those biases. But that is 2 or 3 out of
it's not a lot,
hundreds, thousands, right? So the idea of blind applications and blind CVs is still very, very small. And look, you do, again, it comes back a bit to the ageism thing. No company or no hiring manager will openly admit anything to you around any of those biases, but some will have them, and some others are great and don't have any of those and literally judge people on merit. So
I mean, that's the thing. If it's an unconscious bias, then it's unconscious, right? So
how unconscious,
which is not helpful.
Well,
but,
the difficult thing, to be able to say and put any stats behind is, how unconscious are some of those?
Yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah.
Moving from ageism to something that you touched on, particularly with the Workday comment, Janet, is about the role of automation in the job search, and particularly the role of AI. What do you see as the end game here when you've got, AI and automation driving an exponential increase in applications? How should comms professionals position themselves against all of that noise?
God, big question. Big question that requires a big, long answer. My overarching comment is, I think AI, particularly, less so automation, but the AI element of it is out of control on both sides of the coin. You touched on the sheer volume of applications, Mike. There are apps and software out there now where candidates can pay $20, $25, $30 a month, and you upload your CV, you tell it what jobs you want to apply to, and it will do a scrape of all of the various job boards every night. And using an LLM integration, it will then tailor and tweak your CV and do all of the applying for you. So that has created somewhat of a deluge of applicants to roles. It's not, but also it's not just those. It's there are also CV bot farms, if you like, that will have next to zero relevance to the role. This is not a communications thing, by the way. This is pretty
generic,
much
every
single job that gets advertised anywhere. There will be a deluge of applications from candidates that have no relevant qualifications, experience, skill set. So someone does have to go kind of go through those and find the needles in the haystack that are the good that are the good candidates and applications. On the flip side, the automation side of things, so the acronym is an ATS, which is an applicant tracking system, which nearly all companies and recruiters, when you apply to a job advert, it will go into their ATS. All the ATSs are relatively similar. You can, if you want, turn on some automations that can auto disqualify candidates based on fairly generic information. So if you require in-country experience for a role, you could have it so that it's auto rejecting people who don't live in that country, for example. Things like that, where the AI piece is playing havoc is a lot of these ATSs now are effectively giving options for hiring companies and some recruiters, by the way, to we would call it parse your CV, which is effectively just extracts all of the text, and then it gets put through their own LLM model, which will use some prompts on the back end and effectively try and match a candidate CV to the job description, key skills you can put in on the back that you want. So I think that's where the biggest issue for me is one, there's clearly a prompting issue, but also two, I think a lot of companies and some recruiters have almost started running with this before they've learnt to even walk. So you are getting mass auto rejections of actually candidates that should certainly be at least worth a first screening call with HR or with the recruiter.
Yeah.
That's the issue at the moment is, I think there's almost been probably a bit of a fear of missing out, but also, everyone has jumped on the AI hype train. And a lot of people have gone, wow, look how cool this is. Look how much time and money it can save us. It's doing our resources job for us, or, it's doing our internal talent acquisitions, half their job for them without really looking at the impact and, is it doing a good job? And my answer to that would be no, because of the amount of conversations I have with candidates who apply for roles that are definitely within their wheelhouse. Sure, they might not be the best candidate for it, but they should certainly be, worth that first screening call. And they're getting auto rejections within 2 or 3 minutes. So yeah, there's definitely a breakdown there of, something's gone a bit pitong.
I'm gonna follow up with a question, but I still want to come back to the question of what can candidates and what can professionals do to navigate in this bit. But you were talking specifically about the ATSs doing a match of people in job descriptions. One of the things that I notice is that a lot of these job descriptions are overspecified. If you're noticing that, could you see the specification issue as something that needs to be addressed as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, hey God, one, a lot of job descriptions across companies within the same industry, if you put them side by side, a lot of them will read incredibly similar. Often that is because it's not always the hiring manager writing the job description or the job advert. They will outsource it to their own internal HR or talent acquisition team at the first point of call, right? Often, where will that be taken from? A quick Google or a quick look on LinkedIn jobs. Find a competitor that's got a relatively similar job title advertised, do a copy and paste job, change a few bullet points, obviously change the company name, top and tail it with your own company information, Bob's your uncle, post it. So what does that mean? A lot of what hiring managers really want, and typically it tends to be 3 or 4 of those bullet points amongst the 10 to 20 that are put on a job advert. It's normally 3 or 4 that are the really, really important ones. Name me a job advert that you've seen where it really emphasizes the 3 or 4 things that are really important to the hiring manager. I couldn't name you one. So yes, there is an issue there around being able to write job descriptions well, or really tailoring them well to what the hiring manager really wants. So yeah, that's a bit of an issue. But then what can candidates do about it? My advice to everybody: stick it after your experience and after your education in your CV. So down towards the bottom, but I tend to just use the phrase key skills section, really, and that can be some columns or some bullet points, which really just list a lot of the really common communications, keywords, and phrases that you see time and time again in job descriptions. So it could be everything from corporate communications to internal communications to executive communications to stakeholder management communications campaigns, all of those sort of, think of it from an SEO perspective, those sort of short tail keywords. Just make sure you have a section there that covers off a lot of those, because often, a lot of the ATS systems, it's the keyword match is the overarching thing that's ruling people out. But word of warning with that, do not put them on your CV just to get past any automated screening.
Yeah.
If you don't actually have the experience, or it is not a skill of yours, you will get found out. It's not smart and it's not particularly clever. So do make sure, all of those keywords and phrases that you have in that key skills section are things that you can do.
It does sound from what you're saying, Max, that actually there needs to just be a lot more care and attention to some of this stuff. So we've got hiring managers who aren't necessarily writing the job descriptions. We've got job descriptions that are being sourced, kind of some sort of vanilla beige version of what actually it should be. And should it be bright red or orange or turquoise? Who cares? They've just gone for beige because that's fast. And so there's almost a sense of slow down to go faster here, because as you're putting out beige, you're getting 300 people, if you're doing it via LinkedIn, who will come back to you. And actually, probably none of them are what you're looking for, because you've put out the bat signal for beige, where what you really want is bright orange or burnt sienna or whatever it might be.
Yeah, correct.
And you can't attract burnt sienna if you put out beige.
Yeah,
it feels like there's just a real disconnect there.
Oh, yeah. Because we noticed that actually it's something we're going to be launching before the end of the year at ComSearch is really some template guides, both for HR and for hiring managers, to be able to write good job adverts and write good job descriptions. Because, you're right, Janet, a lot of it is pretty generic, bland and beige stuff that, doesn't really necessarily get to the heart of the role or, heart of what people want.
Yeah.
I think on the flip side of that, though, for candidates as well, particularly if you're out of work at the moment and, you are in the, shall we say, the desperate stage of applying for roles, it can be very tempting just to apply for absolutely everything you see online, throwing mud at the wall and hoping it sticks. Again, that is also not, that is not the way to go about it, because, you will be spending time applying for roles that, are not necessarily in your sweet spot, and there are very likely to be other candidates that do have more direct relevant experience. So, to candidates, I would say, you need to be really hyper-focused on what you're really good at, your experience as well. Make sure that is really clear and noticeable in your CV, and then making sure that you are only applying for roles either right within your sweet spot. There's a bit of tolerance here. We can go, we can go slightly outside the sweet spot. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but just take that time and that bit of self-reflection and almost think of it like this way. If you were going to do a communications campaign or a PR campaign for companies you've worked for, you would be looking at your target audience, you'd be looking at the messaging, and you'd be thinking, right, how do we shape and how do we frame this to engage and to match with what people are looking for?
Yeah.
Apply those same factors to your own CV and your own job search. There is no point sending out a mass email in internal comms to everybody. And do you know what I mean? So, if you take that same approach with your job search, it's not going to land, and you're not going to get the engagement that you're looking for.
Well, I was just going to say, could the same? Sorry, Mike, just to butt in slightly. Could the same be said of hiring managers who need to actually consider this as a comms campaign and consider who are they trying to attract? What are they? Go back to basic communication, know, do, feel. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? You want to attract the right candidates. What do you want them to feel that they are able to do the job? What do you could kind of almost break it down in that way, so that you avoid this. I've had 300 people apply, volume, and it's quantity, not quality, that you're attracting, which then leads to frustration and anger and overwhelm and, oh my goodness, I can't find the person I'm looking for, and ad infinitum.
So again, yeah, you're right, Janet. But actually, when you talk to a hiring manager, a lot of them are very clear on what they want, and they know exactly what they want when you talk to them. They'll be very, and they'll often be very specific as to what they're looking for, the challenges, the types of candidates, experience levels, etc.
So what goes wrong?
It's translating that into, firstly, at the top level, it's the job advert that goes out. Often either because they've just outsourced it all to HR and just, it's one of 25 things they've got to do on their to-do list, so they don't really do a proper proofread of it. That's on them, by the way. 2, again, this is where it goes a little bit of ATS, but actually this goes down to a quality of, if you are recruiting through your own internal team, have you briefed your internal recruiter properly on what you actually want and what you're looking for?
Yeah.
If I had £1 or $1 for every time a hiring manager told me about a awful experience they've had with their internal talent team trying to recruit a role, because often they will say, they don't understand what they're looking for. I think there's a question, there's a question mark for hiring managers to ask themselves: have they made it clear to the internal team what they're looking for? And then if they have, it's a skill and a quality of that internal recruiter. Do they get it? Do they understand it? And are they asking the right questions when they are screening candidates? There's that. So, you've got a few bits there where it can break down. And I guess the same would go, although the onus is on us as external recruitment partners, we would always take the time with a brief with a hiring manager to ask those questions. What do you really want? What are the 3 or 4 key things that we need to look for, whether it's an experience, skill set, personality, etc. But if you end up with an external recruitment partner who isn't asking those questions and doesn't ask the right questions, again, you've just got someone that's just going off a fairly bland and generic job description. So they're not going to get the right candidates in front of you, which leads to frustration all round.
Yeah.
You mentioned, obviously we're talking a bit more about what's happening on the hiring side of the recruitment process at the moment.
Yep.
But one of the things we talked about in our pre-call was really about the challenge that communication professionals have with their own personal branding, with their own storytelling, with the way that they position themselves. What are the mistakes you see most repeatedly, and how could they be avoided?
Where do I start here without insulting people?
Go ahead and insult people as long as you don't name them.
Just don't name and shame.
Yeah, no, of course I won't. I think, particularly when it comes to LinkedIn profiles or, LinkedIn posts, again, stick your comms hat on, stick your PR hat on, and, you need to think messaging, substance, what are you trying to get across? What are you, and really, from a candidate perspective, am I getting across, one, what I'm really good at, but also is it pointing to the pain points and the opportunities that, a hiring manager or a hiring company might be thinking about? So, that's really what you've got to, try and focus a lot of your content on. I have no problem if someone wants to put the occasional post on LinkedIn around, how challenging they are finding the job market. I don't think there is an issue with acknowledging that. Again, comms, PR hat on. If you were doing comms or PR for your company, would you be putting that on most days of the week on LinkedIn, telling everyone how challenging your company is currently finding the market? You wouldn't. So, try not to do that for yourself, and, try and take, and I appreciate this is very difficult when emotions are high and it's personal, but try to take the emotion out of it. Apply what you do internally again as well. when you write something, you don't just write it and send it. You write it, you go away, you have a cup of tea, maybe you leave it overnight, you come back to it fresh, you tweak it and revise it. So yeah, I think, it's just applying some of those really core comms and PR skills that everybody has and does, and just applying it to their own content and their own search. So, and hey, lean on your peers here, because I think sometimes it can be difficult, can't it, to self-evaluate, or sometimes it can be quite difficult to know how punchy, or how much you want to push your own experience or values. I'd say particularly for Brits, definitely, maybe slightly more than Americans. We typically tend to be a little bit more reserved, and the idea of self-promotion here in the UK can be quite anxiety driving. So yeah, use your peers, get a colleague or get a friend to have a little look over what you're thinking, or kind of have a little review of your posts, and you can have a look at theirs, they can have a look at yours, and so between you get a second pair of eyes on things, just so you're getting that tone right. So I think, yeah, that would be my top tip, actually, for those people that are struggling a little bit to try and get that tone right of their posts and the cadence. Get a friend, get a colleague in PR or comms, and ask them, look, if you were doing a PR or comms job on me, what do you think of this?
Now that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. You were talking about the sheer numbers of people involved and how difficult it is, for any of these people to get an interview. Well, guess what? You've gotten an interview. That's the good news. The bad news is that it's a video interview. Tell us a bit more about, the situation with video interviews and how
Yes.
you would want to see the industry addressing this.
By video interviews, I assume you are specifically meaning
the AI video interview.
Yeah, the AI video bots. Jesus, yeah. God, for everyone who hasn't seen it, I did actually post it on my LinkedIn feed. I think it was last week or the week before. But
yeah, I saw it.
Have a little look on YouTube, and you can type in AI job interview bloopers, whatever, and I mean, wild. Yeah, the sooner that stuff gets rolled back, I mean, the better, really.
Yeah.
I totally get if you are an Amazon or you are a Coca-Cola, and you are advertising warehouse jobs, even maybe for your grad schemes, and you are getting thousands and thousands of job applicants, and it is incredibly difficult to try and filter through that. Set up correctly, I think that's where some of these AI bot interviews, I mean, they're not ideal, obviously, but just to try and get through the sheer volume, I can see why they're being used. But for experienced hires, and particularly for communications roles and professionals, yeah, they need to go. I'll quite happily put this on record that, yeah, companies, HR directors, procurement, IT, you may well have looked at this stuff and gone, again, look how much money we can save, how quickly we can get through applicants. They're a disaster. A lot of them don't work properly. Candidates absolutely hate doing them. There are a lot of candidates who will simply refuse to enter a process where it's an AI bot interview. So again, to companies, you are potentially losing out on the best candidates here, because you're not giving them the time or the respect that they deserve as a senior professional, particularly. So you are really harming your own employer brand here. So yeah, really the sooner those get rolled back, the better. I think further on that, it's at its heart, recruitment I mean, I know they call it talent and the people team now, but it always used to be called HR and human resources. What's the first part of that? It's human. People want to deal with people. They really do. They really want that human interaction when it comes to a job interview or a job search. They don't want to speak to a bot. They really don't. So yeah, I think everyone's just got to really think long and hard and go, actually, what is the wider industry we're in here? It's human resources, it's human capital, and, the emphasis on the human part. Bring it back.
I think it's interesting, and I don't know, as a story of somebody who works for one of those companies that you mentioned, and she sat down with somebody who was coming for a job in her team, not entry level, kind of one level above entry level.
Yep.
And I don't know if they had a bot interview first, but this person got through. And they turned up to her interview, and she's, global head of Grand Fromage. And they said, so her time is quite precious. And the first thing she said was say, tell me why you are interested in this role. And the person said, which role is this again? I can't remember. I've applied for multiple roles at your company. So which one are you for?
No,
and
God.
She said, literally, it was just the ultimate cringe. And it's that sense
doesn't
of,
surprise me.
Yes, these things happen and people say, oh, this is awful and I had a bot and this happened and that happened. And then she told me the story and I said, well, what did you do? And she said, well, I was literally looking for ways to get off the call because I didn't want to get off the call within 1 minute, which is really what I wanted to do, because really, that's how you think you're going to be coming and working with me. The disrespect, I think, can be, a lot of times we hear disrespect going one way, and I think sometimes it's kind of important to understand that disrespect is going all different ways, and you may not be the person giving the disrespect, but there are others who are in same processes or similar processes, or there are other stories that are happening out there which do show that happens. And I think that was just a perfect example of somebody who had prayed and, sprayed and prayed and had got through because there was a level of the job that they were able to get through to.
Yes.
They must have had a good university or a good bit of experience on their CV that allowed them to get through that first stage. But then, I mean, personally, I can't imagine saying to somebody, oh, I'm terribly sorry, I can't remember which job this is for. Who are you again? I mean, the rudeness and the lack of comprehension of what you're saying for me seems kind of quite shocking.
Yeah, and actually, you've just jogged my memory. I think, again, on the AI thing, hey, it's not just the AI bots, right? We've all probably seen the adverts on Instagram, TikTok, X, whatever, of these AI interview tools that candidates can use. You can be on a virtual call like we are here, and on your screen there will be an AI tool that is literally listening to the call. It's taking a transcript. It's listening for questions, and when it hears a question, it will give you an answer.
Wow.
It's not instantaneous. And a lot of candidates are now getting caught out because there is a very unnatural pause before they give their answers. And often, their answers are very scripted because it's very obvious when your eyes are darting around and you are reading off a script. It happens. It's happening. It's happening. Yeah.
I haven't heard of that one.
Mental.
That's new.
No, there's tons of these things.
Wild.
It's I don't necessarily think it's candidates at the more senior end, but I'd certainly say earlier in careers. The disrespect thing, Janet, I think you spoke about. Yeah, it's not just overt disrespect. It's the, I think I'm going to, I think I'm really clever by using this, so I'm going to, use an AI. And actually, any article that's written around these AI interviews on both sides, have a look at the comment section on any of the major newspapers that put these on, and there will be a story there of a hiring manager who, tells about a role they're interviewing for, and they caught, one or two candidates out doing this stuff. particularly from consulting firms as well. So,
Ooh.
yeah, it's a mess.
So, given the mess that we're seeing, not just here but elsewhere, what do you think are the 3 things that applicants should be doing to best navigate through this, best maintain their sanity through this, and best position themselves? Particularly over the next year, given the evolution of some of these trends that you anticipate.
Start with the easiest and the obvious things. One, have a look at your CV and your resume. I think make sure you've got a lot of those common keywords that come up in job adverts and job descriptions. That's a fairly quick and a fairly easy thing to do. That should alleviate a decent chunk of any of the auto rejections. What I was saying earlier around don't spray and pray, be more selective, be more targeted, really stick to your sweet spot, and be really tough with yourself on that, by the way, because again, the emotive side can think, God, I'm not getting anywhere. I just need to apply some more things, and I throw more applications in, and it's going to stick. I think by doing that, 1, you raise your stress levels, but 2, actually, you can lose visibility really quickly of what you're really good at. And, you will end up inadvertently missing job adverts for roles that you are really good at because, you're doing a fairly generic search on LinkedIn or on Indeed for, pretty much every communications role you can find. So, yeah, definitely be nice and highly targeted. And thirdly, speak to a friend, get a peer, and do a bit of a comms and PR job on your own, on each other's content, and LinkedIn posts, and kind of even the CV, kind of get them to put a second pair of eyes on it, so it takes any of that personal emotion or even personal anxiety you may be feeling about things. Those are the 3 things I would say would be my top 3, and also I don't think those are overly difficult things to implement either.
No, they seem like they're fairly sort of simple things that you could, and also you could buddy up with somebody to kind of work together and make sure that you're not kind of doing yourself down or doing yourself a disservice or overselling yourself in one way. I really like how you framed the idea of those keywords as almost like personal SEO.
Yeah,
there's a sort of really nice way of framing that. Instead of saying keywords and people go, what do you mean? Do I just need to like write a list of thing? Actually, if you're considering, well, how would you SEO yourself? What does that look? What does that look like? It might allow. Wait, if you were to come to the top of okay, Google searches are so last year, but if you were to come to the top of a Google search, if AI was to find you for one specific thing, like how would it find you? What would put you at the top of that Google search? And I think that's a really kind of nice way of framing that, even though I do understand that Google searches are very, very last year. I get it.
Yeah, well, yeah. Although everyone talks about kind of the rise of GEO and ChatGPT search, etc. We get some referrals at ComSearch through that. Still, the overwhelming majority of our web traffic comes through Google and Google searches.
Okay. So it's still relevant.
kind of GEO and AI is definitely up and coming, but God, I saw a great LinkedIn post the other day, and I will try and dig out the exact figure, but someone said if you look at the daily volume of searches on Google versus ChatGPT at the moment, ChatGPT would be who's the guy that Sam Altman.
Yep.
If you put Sam Altman outside the bottom of the Empire State at the bottom, he would be ChatGPT searches, and the Empire State Building would be Google. So, it's growing, but there have got to be a lot of Sam Altmans to get up to the size of the Empire State Building.
Well, it just also shows how if you've got a narrative and you've got momentum, that actually you can tell a story that means that that's what everyone assumes. But actually, if you do look at the data and you look at the traffic, it's not exactly matching the narrative.
Oh, look, it's gone from absolutely nowhere to not being
from
a thing.
zero to hero, absolutely.
Yeah. But it's, it's more prevalent, but it's still, it is a drop in the ocean compared to daily Google searches still.
Fair enough. So the SEO thing still stands.
It's still really important. And on the flips, most ATSs, are still, if they are filtering, they are still primarily filtering through keywords.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah.
Anything else either of you would like to add? Anything else we haven't covered?
Hey, shameless plug. Shameless plug.
We like shameless plugs. Go
There's
for
always
it.
a shameless plug. Go on, Max.
Yeah, look. Hey, look. We are starting to have more conversations on a daily basis with hiring managers and hiring companies who haven't quite thrown in the towel on, the AI and the direct talent searching, but they are starting to understand that, hey, actually having a human involved in the process who knows what they are talking about and can have those human conversations with candidates as part of that, is actually still pretty valuable and still pretty important. So I would just say, to those hiring managers and those hiring companies who, are struggling to recruit directly, hit me up.
Well, I think you make an excellent point there, which is that, in this sea of lots of indifferent content, lots of indifferent candidates, and lots of organizational indifference, that, when you've got something that is important, it's going to make more sense to have somebody who understands that importance involved in the search. I mean, I'm kind of seeing that we might see a rebound in the comms recruitment world. Certainly, I'd like to see that. Obviously, you'd like to see that. And certainly, I imagine most candidates would like to see that as well.
Oh, yeah. You hear it from candidates all the time, right? So, yeah, it's coming, and it is slowly coming back. It's, but yeah, it is just taking its time just to weed through. It will come back.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I was just going to say, I think it's when you see that idea of a role is still, or a role gets advertised and you think, oh, that's come around again. So either the hire didn't work or someone dropped out or a process was an issue or there was something that went wrong. And then you understand the cost of what that will be and the cost to the company of keeping that open. Or I spoke to somebody, I think it was at the end of last year, and very clearly she was very clearly overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that was coming at her. She hadn't used a search company. She hadn't, I think she was using her internal hiring team, but they weren't particularly helping her very much. And some of the things that were sort of said to me, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. You kind of, you're in this pickle of your own making. And there are lots of things that you could very easily do in order to actually go find somebody who could find you burnt sienna, coming back to my lovely analogy. And if you're just being handed vanilla, or you don't have enough time to read something to see that person is burnt sienna, and you're just dismissing them because it's just too much, it's just too hard, it's just too, then it gets a little bit silly. And the cost of all of that, I think, is what's really tragic. There's a cost to the people who are in those processes. There's a cost to the companies who don't have somebody in that role doing that job. And then the poor person who then gets the job has got a role that hasn't been touched for 6 months. So they're playing catch up. They're playing, it's suddenly gone into a really difficult position. And it really doesn't need to be like that. It really doesn't.
No, it's huge. And actually, I think, we've done a few roles recently where, we sat down with the head of comms and said, because often, typically, the full sort of recruitment agency budget would sit with HR. But, I've said, look, have you got any spare comms budget left for the year? Oh, yes, I do. Well, there you go. Split some of the cost. Yeah. Split some of the cost with HR, and then everyone's happy. There are, there are ways around this. You just have to be a little bit inventive.
Yeah. Brilliant. Max, thank you.
Pleasure. No,
Thank you very much, Max. This was excellent.
Oh, thank you. Very kind. And yeah, thank you for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure.
So what did you think of that, Janet?
I really enjoy talking with Max. I always do. I like his no-nonsense approach to calling out certain things and to kind of being really practical about what you can and can't do. I also like how he calls out certain practices that both HR teams, hiring managers, but also candidates do. And I think the shocking one there for both of us, I think we both had a bit of a, oh my God moment, was that idea that there is somebody who gets an AI to join a call and then sits and reads, waits for the AI, sees the question, waits for the AI to come up with an answer, and then sits and reads the answer of a script. I'd never heard of that before. I find that quite shocking as somebody who's going to be potentially hiring in the next 2 quarters. Even if that is not going to be in the UK or the US, it's going to be in Africa. But I was really quite shocked that is something that happens. So, no, I loved it. I love the fact that he tries to call stuff out. And I think that's just really helpful. I think it's really helpful for the industry to progress and for us as community to progress as well.
I agree. I liked his openness. I really liked the extent to which he was talking about where applicants and where professionals need to get their act together, because most of what I hear, I talk more to professionals, obviously, than I talk to recruiters or hiring managers. Yeah. But most people who are seeking positions have a very one-sided view of what's wrong with the market. And I think Max has done a real service in this conversation about balancing that with some things that people can actually do to improve their odds and improve the way that they, present themselves and the way that they approach this. I mean, even if adopting this approach doesn't necessarily get you to a job faster, it allows you to maintain your edge once you get into those conversations.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great conversation. And on to the next one.